I had the pleasure of visiting Banda, Aceh, Indonesia in 2005, early 2005, actually 12 days after the tsunami hit the coast of Indonesia. As you can see, I've seen some pictures from the internet, but in my presence, you can see vast devastation, of which actually I have not seen since then. Complete roads, bridges, utilities, infrastructure ripped from their foundations. I witnessed a 4-story barge, which is the lower corner of this picture here, driven 3.5 miles inland around a mountain range and dropped in the middle of a neighborhood. Most compelling to me were these huge debris fields, 15, 20 miles long and about 3.5 miles wide of complete devastation. What struck me was across these vast debris fields, there were formerly neighborhoods. And what I observed were, actually, you can see them slightly in this picture and this picture there, but you saw residents, displaced residents, digging among the debris and getting to a point where they thought was their property, stuck a stick in the ground with a flag to note that this is where my property was. Now there was disputes going on between a number of the residents, as clearly all reference points to where their property was were completely wiped out and gone. So I witnessed over a 5-month period of working there, literally billions of dollars of effort being made from food, water, equipment, brawn, to drive the recovery in Indonesia. But to me, one of the most telling real keynotes of where the recovery began in Indonesia was really due to technologies driven out of this industry. It wasn't until geospatial mapping and GIS information was applied that we could find the literally tens of thousands of residents were able to find where their designated property used to be, and they were aided to be able to find their properties. Once they found their properties, working with the local governments in this technology, that really the recovery began, because you began to see tents pop up in their location where they used to live, and that, as we've learned over many disasters, is really when a recovery starts. When the neighborhood can get back to where they were, you'll start to see a real sense of recovery. So I'm here to acknowledge that this industry has made a significant impact, not only in the design and engineering profession, but around the world. And I also acknowledge that the industry has probably been a bit underappreciated and undervalued. Industry that's been a number of silos and compartmentalized pieces of companies and industries. But I see today as really a new beginning, and that the time to bring geospatial professionals and technologies really to the forefront of the technologies, making this professions and the technologies something that's valued in the expertise in the engineering and design field. And so it's really a time for a step change, I think, of the progress of our profession. Back to the US here, where obviously we're facing a tremendous gridlock of infrastructure. I'm not talking about traffic, I'm really referring to stagnated inactivity of deferred maintenance and project starts and infrastructure throughout the US. As you well know, the US is below needed spending levels by some $3 trillion, it's estimated, to update our infrastructure. The US has fallen to number 16 globally in infrastructure from the World Economic Forum. And lastly, our own American Society of Civil Engineers gives our infrastructure, public infrastructure, a D+ rating. So the complexity of these issues facing our infrastructure gridlock feels much like chaos. And I see it much like the chaos that I saw in Banda Aceh, Indonesia, with a large number of stakeholders present nowadays, with the drive to really find and bridge funding gaps for our revenue starts and revenue streams for projects obviously the political paralysis that dominates our U.S. And also what I feel is the unappreciated importance by the general public of the need for our infrastructure revival. So how do we move past this challenge? I believe that GIS, information management, and BIM modeling is really a key solution to working through some of these issues. One of the beauties of information management, particularly GIS and BIM, is that it has an ability to bring order to chaos. It really allows for a project to come alive, and I referenced that project for you as a good example. But it also has an ability to show a vision of how maybe transportation-oriented developments, or TODs, can actually provide needed funding gaps for some of our infrastructure projects in the U.S., and how those concepts can be moved into reality. I think it also creates possibilities for stakeholders to see their way out of some of this infrastructure gridlock. So we've put together sort of 4 suggested elemental solutions that I think can move us past and make us, help us with the step change in this industry. First and foremost, that geospatial and BIM be made active and present throughout the life cycle of our projects. I gave you an example of how this was used after a disaster in Indonesia. But to me, the answer rests in really getting the profession out of the closet and out in front of projects, even in the conceptual stage, even in the selling stage, to help move these projects through. I also think that the answer lies in a fully integrated and collaborative teams that are represented all through the life cycle of the project. And by that, I mean a truly diverse team that respects diversity. Because I believe a collaborative, diverse team really leads to innovation. And as we all know, creating a shared and common language is critical in this industry, as the diverse number of professions that touch here. And lastly, that the information become open and sharing, and that the value and the realization of the value of that data be utilized through the project lifecycle. I wanted to give you an example of a project that we put these principles in place that we view as quite successful. It was a complex project that involved a base realignment and closure base in northeast U.S. here. A complex project which involved both expanding and contracting infrastructure that had to be coordinated with an active, heavily active military base with a large number of stakeholders. So, which really points to me as a recipe for a grinding halt of a project. But from the inception, we developed a team, a quite diverse team that invested with owners and stakeholders, as well as engineers, planners, architects, and GIS and BIM professionals, as well as third-party consultants and engineers. The team agreed on a common operating picture for the major program elements, and they worked within a single shared system of the information. And what came out of the team's effort was an innovative 3-dimensional model, which really was aligning the infrastructure planning that needed to happen and coordinating that with base activities through a time-phased graphical, what I consider a masterpiece. And it took the stakeholders and owners quite by surprise, and really pushed the project along. This model that we use, we call it 4D Viz, is something that the base continues to use today as new assets come online, and they're using it for their barracks program also. So with the complexity of this project, it allowed stakeholders to see how they could coordinate base activities and still have tremendous infrastructure work going on in their active base. So I wondered what our industry would look like if we in fact worked that way today. I mean, I could envision really a future where a really engaged multidisciplinary teams are quite energized over the more rapid progression of our built infrastructure, an infrastructure that's more resilient. I can see that the impacts of man-made and natural disasters at least be lessened as we use information management, particularly GIS and BIM, to really be proactive in our designs and less reactive. And I see a renaissance of U.S. infrastructure as we can move projects along and they become more of a reality. I can also envision that, that neighborhoods and stakeholders could actually get past their frustration with current infrastructure and support new projects. But most importantly, I see a more purpose-felt industry full of employees and colleagues that really are excited about designing and building infrastructure that is both resilient and more interactive. So I know that tsunamis will continue, and we also know the complexity of infrastructure projects will continue and will increase. So it's how we choose to respond that's at question. So here I look at a picture of how Banda Aceh, Indonesia looks today. And looking at this picture, I wonder really how much we have learned. Is this built environment more resilient? And or is it loved more by the residents? And I often wonder, what if it didn't take a decade to recover? What if it was avoided altogether, or at least less catastrophic? So I think with the movement of this profession, technology advancements, and the teams that using some of the solutions that we've proposed today, that it is possible. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.